Hey, you saw my okay. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you to today's webinar on a conversation with Dr. Lee Blaney. Just a quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. So today we have 1 hour. First half, I'm not sure how long the first half will be, but we have pre-selected questions, about 10 questions. And following that, we will also spend some time for asking questions from the audience. That's a plan. After this, because this is being recorded, the script will be shared, not all of them, but it's somehow modified based on the original script and then shared through AEESP newsletter. And also, even though it's undecided, just so you know, we have AEESP YouTube channel. So maybe this may not be shared, but undecided, just so you know. Just to quickly introduce who we are, this is a new community of practice within the AEESP called S.o.S Giants, or Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, which I like the best. Whenever I Google or Google Scholar, I see that a message, and also inspired by S.o.S, helping, asking for help. That's the inspiration. And this is not typical technical talk. We are all interested in research, but we have other opportunities. But this community, we focus more on personal development and sharing some wisdom, basically from our senior or giants or any leaders within the area. And we started with a small group of junior faculty throughout the U.S. From chemical engineering, civil environmental, and myself as Taeyong from Clarkson. We have a bunch of other community members here. Mohan, Ryan, Mimi Wences, Saeed are here for today. And for today, we have Dr. Lee Blaney. So we'll have a short conversation with Dr. Lee Blaney, Associate Director, Liaison, and full Professor of Biochemical, and Environmental Engineering at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. Lee, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm
Okay,
a
thank
little
you.
bit intimidated, to be honest with you. But
Yeah,
first, I want to thank you, Taeyang, as well as the rest of the community. Um, it's really an honor to be here. It's an honor to be selected for this conversation. Like I say, I feel a little bit, maybe not intimidated, but awkward in some way. I don't feel like a giant. I feel like we're all giants. We're all doing this thing together. Um, and so, kind of being the first go at this, feeling maybe a little bit of that, who am I? Who am I to share my knowledge, with all of you? But one thing that I always tell my students, like when they can't, kind of, kind of feel like they did a good job at something, like just listen to the people that give you positive feedback. And so I'm trying to lean into this opportunity. So you all selected me as a giant. And so even though I feel a little bit awkward about that, I'm just going to lean into it, try to share some of my stories here with you today. And maybe some of the like lessons that have come from that. And so like before we get started, let me just thank you. Like I'm totally honored, totally humbled. Um, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
yeah, you are indeed my giant, just so you know. And thank you so much for time with us today. So let's get started. As I said, we have 10 pre-selected questions. Let's go through one by one. Let's begin with, because it's typical to introduce, if you go to the conference, a long list of achievement, but I want to hear something from you directly. For example, first question, can you tell us about your academic journey with us, particularly motivations, any moments or experience that you shaped your path until you got here?
Yeah, certainly. I love this question. I love talking about this question, in kind of pivotal moment because I know exactly what that was. And maybe some people kind of develops like over their life, their experiences, and you can't pinpoint like the exact moment where you figured out what you want to do, but I know, and I feel like I'm really lucky that I know that. So when I was an undergraduate student, my first 2 years, I was way more into being an activist, protesting, kind of rallying on campus, off campus. trying to share maybe like my politics, my ideas with the rest of the world. Um, and that was fine, but like I didn't really have motivation beyond that. Like maybe I just wanted to be a professional protester or something like that. Um, and then one day, I saw a seminar by Dr. Arup Sengupta. He was my first mentor at Lehigh University. And that 1 hour seminar like changed my whole life, my whole trajectory, my whole mindset, honestly. And so if you don't know, Arup Sengupta has done, lots of different work, but I think his most impactful work has really been on removing arsenic from groundwater in South Asian countries, but also, all around the world. So he gave a seminar about that work. I thought it was the coolest thing. And so afterwards, I went up to him. I said, "Hey, I really enjoyed your seminar. Like, can I change my major to environmental engineering, which they had just opened? They didn't have it when I started college." And so he was like, yes. So I became like the first class of undergraduate environmental engineers at Lehigh. Um, and I was like, and can I join your lab? And he said yes. I don't know why he said yes, because he didn't know anything about me, but he gave me that shot. Um, and so I started working in his lab, and we were developing novel materials for selective arsenic removal, but also thinking about the systems, also thinking like if you're working in very rural like villages, not a lot of like hazardous waste infrastructure, not a lot of resources, like how do you maintain safely the arsenic-laden waste after you remove it? It's not good enough to just remove it and then leave like a very concentrated arsenic-laden waste hanging around in these areas. And so I was like really thrilled to get to do that research. As I was graduating, he said, "Hey, stay with me for a master's and I'll send you to India." And so I was kind of like, okay, cool. Like, honestly, as a kid in high school, I was just trying to get out of my neighborhood. Like the idea to get out of this country and go somewhere like so new and so far away was just like really exciting to me. And so I went to India, and I was on the ground, working in these villages and meeting people. And that was like maybe the secondary pivotal moment because until then it was kind of just like, research in a lab. It was kind of like homework, an experiment, but it wasn't real. Like it wasn't people's lives. Like that was part of the motivation, but I didn't really know like what that was. It didn't have any kind of real impact for me. But when I was there and I was in the villages and it's like I was talking to people who had limbs amputated because of arsenic poisoning, who had lost many family members because of arsenic poisoning. When I was playing with the little kids and like that was their water source, like all of a sudden it became very real for me. Like, why do we do this work? It's to help people. And I think, overall academia, like for me at least, that's what it's about. We do the research to help people, we train students to help them improve their opportunities, for their lives. Everything we do, in my opinion, is just about helping people. And
Mhm.
so, being there on the ground is totally transformative. Um, I was in West Bengal, kind of outside of Calcutta and, in different areas around Calcutta. And one place that I visited while I was there, on that trip almost 20 years ago now, is called the Great Banyan Tree. So some of you may know about banyan trees. They kind of start with one trunk that goes up, and then it spreads out and it sends roots down, from kind of aerial kind of elevations down to the ground, and it adds more roots. And so the Great Banyan Tree, you can look this up. It's like 19,000 square meters. That's how much area it covers. It's like 3.5 football fields. Just one tree. It looks like a forest, but it's just one tree. And for me, like that's really such a strong lesson in life. Like these people that I met, they probably don't remember me. I don't remember their names, but I can close my eyes and I can like envision them. I can remember our interactions just like it was, yesterday. But they're like those roots, So this great banyan tree, it's got like over 3,700 roots that it's shot down into the ground to help it spread out over this huge area. So all these people that we meet, during our lives, they're those roots. Arup Sengupta was a big one for me, but, the little kids that I met in that village, the old lady that made me lunch, the students that we work with every day, like they're all roots. They help us spread out. They help us grow. And I think there's just something that's so beautiful about that. Like both in life in general, but also like as academics and professors,
Mm,
all of those roots, those are our students, and then they shoot new roots out, and we keep growing and expanding. And
mm,
so that pivotal moment for me was, seeing Arup's seminar and the fact that he gave me a chance,
mm,
to do all of these other things.
mhm. Interesting. So I have one minor question because you specifically mentioned in your bio, which I really enjoyed reading, to be honest. You mentioned your advisor said hippie like you, right? Can you comment? Do you have any comment on that? Like, what is that? Where is that coming from? Hippie like you.
Okay, yeah. No, I like that one. So honestly, it's kind of a little bit funny because, you know, kind of growing up, I listened to punk rock music. I was kind of a punk rocker. In college, the same. So I looked very different. The picture on the screen here, if you saw a
Okay.
picture of me in college, you say, "Wow, who is that guy?" Um, and
Hmm.
so I was kind of into that. But Arup, I guess, saw me and saw a little bit more of a hippie. And so when I was thinking about going for my PhD, I had a plan to go to a different university, but then Arup said, "Hey, there's this guy down in Texas. He's kind of a hippie like you." He was talking about Des Lawler. Um, like, just send him a message. Just send him a message, see what he has to say, see if he's interested in talking to you or whatever. And so, I sent Des a quick email. He sent me like a 5-page response, and I was like, wow, he really put a lot into this. Like, I better go and visit. And I'm really glad I did, because I think Arup, Des Lawler, Lynn Katz, who was my co-advisor at UT Austin, um, we all exude the same values. And I think when you're looking for people to work with, whether that's advisors or students or collaborators, I think for me, like those people that exude the same values as you, they have the same principle system, those are the people that I really like working with. And so I think Dez is a little bit more of a hippie. Like he kind of, looks like a wizard, but he likes to tell stories about his protesting days back in the 60s. And so we definitely had those aspects in common. And I think that's why Arup connected us.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the next question. It's also related. Our next question is on reflecting on your journey. How have the demands and focus of your responsibility, especially in work and life, as in that's a big question, and how does that transform as you move into a senior leadership position? Because I also asked a similar question, but it didn't hear about details, but many often say many senior professors say, oh, as I move on, my balance is getting worse and worse. So can you,
Mm.
but I'm not sure if that's the only one or several example, or is it typical, or if you have any thoughts or lessons you can share with us.
Yeah. So I want to tell you a story, but I want to go further back in my past. And so I'm going to take you all the way back to like, I don't know, fourth or fifth grade in one of my first jobs. So technically, you're not allowed to work when you're that age, but I had a number of under the table jobs before I was actually 13 years old and officially able to work. And so one of those, I think it was probably my first job, I was a paper boy. And so fourth or fifth grade, pretty little kid, had a paper route. And so I think I had like maybe 150 papers that I had to deliver, something like that. And so when I first got started, it's like, okay, 150 papers, I can't carry all of them at one go. Maybe I can carry like 30, maybe 20. I don't know how many it was. And so it kind of took a long time. I'd wrap up all my papers, I'd go out with 30, deliver those, have to go back home, pick up the next batch, deliver those, go back home, pick up the next batch. It takes a lot of time. I wasn't very efficient. I wasn't very strong. I couldn't carry enough papers. But, after a little bit of time, maybe I got stronger, I could carry more. And so maybe what took me 5 trips before was now just taking me 2 trips. I'm loaded up with my papers, these huge bags, little kid, just really carrying a heavy load here through the neighborhood. And I was like, you know what? I like riding bikes. Let me see if I can actually ride my bike and deliver papers at the same time. That was a pretty messy start. I'm sure I fell many times, probably scraped up my knees, everything else. It's hard to balance that load, on a bike. But eventually I got the hang of it. I was able to deliver the papers much faster. And so until that time, I was really just focused on like the time. How long is it taking me to do this? Um, but at that point, I was like, okay, well, maybe I can actually be like a better paper delivery person. Can I actually throw the paper so it lands on someone's doorstep? And I got pretty good at slinging papers. I'm riding my bike down the street, slinging papers left and right, getting them to land on the doorstep. And I was like, you know what? Like, I need more of a challenge. Like, it's gotten too easy. I can ride my bike, I can deliver them fast, I can get them to land right on the step. And so I started setting more challenges for myself. Could I get the paper to land on top of the car, without it sliding off? Papers were usually wrapped in plastic bags so they can slide off the car pretty easily. Could I get the paper to land on top of the trash can? That's tough. You're throwing it, it's got a lot of momentum. How do you get it to stop right on the trash can? Well, you can probably figure out I got fired pretty quickly after that because people were coming out and saying, oh, their newspaper's on top of their car, it's in their trash can, who is this paper boy? He's terrible. But the story here is, meant to kind of reflect like our academic journey. In the beginning, it's just, can I do it? Can I get papers published? Can I get grants, accepted? Can I earn tenure? For me, that was kind of like, okay, can I actually like carry these papers and deliver them out there? Okay, now maybe you get tenure and it's, can I be more efficient? Can I increase my success rate with getting papers accepted, the first time, with getting grants accepted the first time? Okay, able to do that. Moving on to the next challenge. Can we start tackling bigger projects? Okay, and so like as we go, it's like, hey, can I prove myself? Can I actually do this? Now, can I have a bigger impact? And I think, as you advance to more senior positions, and maybe for me, especially in these last couple of years, like being on the AEESP board and serving as president, okay, now it's kind of like, let me set some real challenges for myself, and they should be a little bit risky. And so throwing newspapers into the trash can, I risked my job and yeah, I lost that job. But doing these bigger things, maybe it's bigger risk, but it's also a bigger reward because we can have a bigger impact. And so we're always building efficiencies like as we go on in our careers. It always gets a little bit more demanding, more challenging, but at the same time, like the gratification is higher. And so I'm certain last year as AWSP president, like I was working harder than I've worked any year of my life. But it was so gratifying to see, hey, we're building new programs like S.o.S. Giants. Saeed, I see you over there, like AWSP experts. We're building these programs that I think are benefiting our members, benefiting our fields. And so when you have the like capacity to do that, it's rewarding, it's gratifying, and it's worth the time, that it takes to pour into that. And so for me, like I just try to focus on doing things as well as I possibly can, and doing things that I think have impact. And from that perspective, like, yeah, a lot more people want our time, but it's worth it. And so for me, I've actually really cherished moving up the ranks and having that opportunity for bigger impact.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. I think that leads us to the next question because then now we have to expand it, not just survey. You just mentioned your service role as the formal AWSA president, but there are, three major elements about our job for them, research, teaching, and service. But when I looked at your CV, I was surprised because there's so many awards, teaching awards, research grants, and also you're doing lots of service roles, including AWSP. So what is your secret, you know, recipe to achieve all those at the same time so far?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I'm trying to think, this must have been, maybe it was like my third year contract renewal when I was an assistant professor, or maybe when I was going up for tenure. I had a line, it was the first line in my self-assessment, and it said, one of my mentors, Des Lawler, always said that the best researchers, should be the best teachers, and the best teachers should be the best researchers. And one of my mentors here at UMBC looked at that and said, "Oh, you better be careful saying that because some people think research is more important, and some people think teaching is more important, and so you might ruffle some feathers." Um, but I kept it. I ruffled those feathers, and I actually also added another element, about service. For me, I think our job, it's so special and like not just any one part of it. Like I love the research, that our group does. It's very interesting for me. I think it has a lot of impact. I love watching the students, kind of take ownership of the projects and move them forward. I'll never get over how cool it is to write proposals. Again, one of my goals when I was young was like just get out of this neighborhood. Like I don't want to live my whole life here. And now it's like, oh, we write a proposal just from some idea in our head, and someone's going to give us like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars like for each page of our idea. Like, how cool is that? Like, you don't have to build anything. You don't have to like be in a factory. You don't have to be doing manual labor. Like, just sit down, think, have some idea, and then like we get this funding to actually, try to make it work. That's so cool to me. Teaching, this opportunity to grow our impact overall, like the banyan tree, every student in our class, that's another route. We can kind of expand our impact, and just the good that our fields does in the world. And then service is kind of the same thing. And so for me, like I wouldn't give up any one of these three items. I don't prioritize any one over the others. That might be a bit controversial. Some people might say research always has to come first, but I don't really feel that way. Like I like to lend equal weight, maybe not necessarily equal time, but equal weight to all three of these aspects of our job. So how to actually do it, that's challenging. I will say I'm a very organized person. I have kind of my own organizational system that I've built. It's kind of in OneNote, and I try to keep track of all of my tasks. And so I update it daily, every single day. Like I kind of copy and paste my to-do list over.
Okay,
Kind of
maybe
have like
that's
five.
already the next question. So how you organize, your day? Probably you just said maybe I will just, move on to the
Yeah.
next question. Please keep going.
Yeah, sure. So there's kind of like five main columns. Like some of it is kind of like, okay, what's up today? What's on the schedule? What meetings? Things like that. The next is kind of like long-term things that are always continuing. So like my editorial duties, my duties for professional societies, things like that. Next one, maybe proposals. The next one, papers. And then the final one, maybe kind of like, travel and things like that. Any given day, there's probably like 80, 120 items on my list, but I need to see all of them. If I'm not seeing tasks, it's easy to kind of lose track, fall behind. And so I have like a color coding system. I put a bunch of links in there. I have different pages that kind of help me keep track of like, hey, here's what I'm trying to do with like future project ideas. Here's what I'm trying to do with AEESP. And so I keep track of everything, and it can be overwhelming because, like I said, there's like over 100 tasks on this list, but it really helps me to prioritize my time and also not feel so much pressure. Like if I say, okay, today's Friday and I'm going to do these five things, if I don't do it, I feel a little bit bad. Like, oh, I didn't accomplish what I set out to. But when there's 100 things on the list, like you're never going to get there. And so it takes a little bit of that pressure off, and helps you just focus on do one task at a time, do it well and, make sure, you're kind of, doing it, kind of as best as possible. So it's the best work that you can put out.
Mm,
So a typical day for me, I will say like I like to try to protect my mornings. I think
mm,
I have the best focus in the morning for writing, for moving projects forward, working on manuscripts, proposals. And so I try to protect that time. Can't always do it, but that's what I try to do. I usually schedule meetings in the afternoons. It usually takes all afternoon. Um, and then in the evenings, I tend to do email and my editor duties. I like to
mm,
do email at night, late at night, because then people don't respond to me right away. We don't get into a back and forth. So I
mm,
kind of like to send one email to a person a day. I don't want to send like 20 emails back and forth all day long. It takes a lot of time. Maybe they can send me 20 messages, but then I just respond in one.
mm,
Um, I think it can be really dangerous if you just have your inbox open all day and you're always like responding back and forth, to get other things done. I also make sure to take time, kind of at night after I finish up all of those things. My routine is I wash the dishes. So I think as an environmental engineer, maybe I'm a little bit bad. I know it's not efficient to wash dishes by hand. Like using a washing machine or dishwasher is more efficient in terms of water use. But I really like washing dishes by hands. Like I feel like I'm doing something, I'm accomplishing something. So every night I wash the dishes and then I read for pleasure for like 30, 60 minutes. Before going to sleep. And so that kind of just helps me like doing the dishes and reading for pleasure, to kind of like slow my minds down, stop thinking about work stuff, and I can actually get good rest.
Okay, interesting. I have actually a lot more tiny question, but I think it's time to move on. But later I'll ask other question when we meet in person. Okay. Our next question, let's move on. Maybe let's switch a gear a little bit. So far, 4 questions were all about your role, work in life, how you manage your time. But this is more about, why you're doing all of those. And sometimes, bad things happen. But I think I'm not sure if you have the answer of any of those because you look so successful all, from all of this. I feel like, oh, maybe none of your paper may not be rejected at all, or something like that. And or all of your positions, you got, whatever you wanted so far based on your profile, but you may have your own challenges. So can you share any 1 or 2 stories and how you overcame that, for example?
Well, let me first just correct you. I got plenty of fails. I got plenty of losses in my bag, and I think we all do. That's just part of it. Um, Yeah, I mean, my last president's letter, for AEESP, I kind of use this analogy of Rocky. So I'm from Philly originally. Maybe you all have seen the movie Rocky. It's about an amateur boxer from Philly, and he kind of gets the call to go up against, the world's heavyweight champion. Um, and he loses. And so I take a lot of inspiration from Rocky. I think it's worth going after big things, but don't expect to necessarily win. The important thing is just that you put yourself out there, you go for it, and you take the chance. And so, yeah, I got plenty of losses. Maybe one that I can share. I think it will resonate, with a lot of the folks on the call is just the NSF Career Award. So I came in as assistant professor straight from my PhD. Like I defended my PhD and 1 week later, I was assistant professor. So I didn't really have any break or anything like that. I just kind of dove right in and I was totally bright-eyed. I had a lot of confidence and I was totally naive and I got put in my place pretty quickly. All of those first papers got rejected. All of those first proposals got rejected. I'm sure people told me, and people probably told you, don't submit your NSF career proposal your first year. Like I said, I was naive, I was stubborn, I had lots of ideas. I submitted my first year, and it did not work out. Basically, the panel said, hey, you need more preliminary data. Hey, we're not sure that this is going to work. But they kind of liked the idea, to be honest with you. So it wasn't like a total loss. It wasn't a brutal loss or anything like that. But I said, okay, let me slow down a little bit and like make sure I take some time, to improve my grant writing, get more preliminary data, get a little bit more in the tank first before I go again for my second try. And so I waited a few years, we had some wins, got some papers out, got some awards in. I said, okay, I think I'm ready for my second try on the career proposal. I wrote it up. I thought this is the best proposal I've ever written. Like I was so proud of it. I thought it was such a great idea. The panel hated it. It was the worst reviews I've ever gotten. Any proposal I think I've ever submitted, that was the worst reviews I've ever gotten. And so I said, okay, like what was that about? And so I tried to like take a little bit of time, give myself some space, come back with a free mind, try to make sure I understood what the panel was telling me. And so I said, okay, I got one more chance, and so I got to make it count. And so that last chance, I wrote a proposal. I got started early. I wrote a proposal and, I wasn't 100% on it. Like I was maybe 90%, but I didn't fully believe in it. And I just like couldn't push myself to submit that one. And so I scrapped it. I wrote another proposal. Same thing. I was 90% on it, but I couldn't say that I was 100%. I fully believed in it. So I scrapped that one. So here I am. I'm like four NSF career proposals, in at this point. I write, another one. So third one, this one I was like, I actually believe in this idea. I'm 100% on it. Like I think it's strong. Like this is the one I'm going to go with. But let me make sure I'm doing my due diligence. I sent it out to a bunch of trusted colleagues in my department, outside of my department. I got feedback, critical feedback, helped me improve it, use that, to make sure that I was submitting something that I felt really like very good about and that had a good chance.
Mm.
And, many months later, I get a call as I'm leaving work from Bill Cooper. And he's like, "Hey Lee, Bill Cooper here. Guess what?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "I'm funding your proposal. It's the last one that I'm funding." And so I got it by like the skin of my teeth. I don't know, why he told me that last part, that I was the last one in line. But I guess I was the last one and it was my third shot. And so, it's just kind of maybe a lesson in resilience. I had, one loss on the first try, wasn't terrible. Big loss on the second try. Had a lot of pressure that I put on myself for the third try, wrote several proposals, but just made sure I did my due diligence, got feedback, tried to be open-minded about how do I incorporate that feedback while still holding on to my ideas,
Mhm.
and it worked out. And so
Mm.
I think, we have to be pretty resilient, in this job.
Mhm.
It still hurts me, like when things don't get accepted, like I feel some type of way about that, and I have to take a, day or two to myself before I jump back in. But I think that's good. Like I think that just means that we care about our work, we care about our students, that we're doing that project, writing up the paper. We care about our ideas. And so I actually think, it's good to feel some type of way when we have losses. And I don't know, maybe it's that Rocky Balboa like attitude inside of me, but I'm kind of more inspired by losses. Like when I get knocked down, like I really want to get back up and say like, I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them that I can do it. And that really drives me.
Okay, okay, interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So let's move on to our next question. So it's a little bit also different topic. It's now more about your professional networking. So I don't know how your networking is now. For example, I see you are connected with many other researchers in the other Asian countries, for example, because you're traveling a lot, and also you visited. So, but also even within the U.S. or even within the field, can you tell us any story or strategy about your own networking?
Yeah, certainly. So I don't remember if like the application form is the same now, but when I joined AEESP, like you kind of fill out your name and that kind of information. Then there was a question like, what committees are you interested in? And I'm certain I just hit the select all button. Like I'll join any committee that wants to have me. I wasn't like so kind of set on any kind of thing. Yeah, I was okay, like I'll contribute in whatever way I can. Yeah, I'm just happy to be part of the team. And so I did that, and the first committee to reach back out to me was membership and demographics. And so I said, okay, great. Like I'll join this committee. They'll have me. So I joined my first meeting, and those of you that are on committees, this might sound familiar, but I think by the end of that first meeting, I was co-chair of the committee. They're looking to like get new people involved, cycle the leaders and things like that. And so maybe by my second or third meeting, I became chair of the committee. And I remember asking Shannon Bartelt Hunt from University of Nebraska-Lincoln, hey, like, what should I do now that I'm committee chair? Like, what should I do? She said, well, there's a couple of things that we've been trying to do as a committee, and we just haven't been able to like get the energy behind them just yet. And so I was like, okay, that sounds great. And so she gave me a couple of ideas that had been tossed around the committee for a few years. And one of them was reporting on the demographics of environmental engineering students and faculty. And so I was, okay, like I can do that. Like you tell me what to do and I can do it. And so we formed kind of a subcommittee from membership and demographics. We really dug into this area, like where do we find the data? How do we analyze the data? How do we extract the data? How do we report it and everything else? And we wrote a couple of papers that we published in Environmental Engineering Science. those papers have not gotten a lot of real citations. But I've served on a lot of NSF panels, and what I can say is that those papers are very frequently cited for like the broader impacts or the educational plans of NSF
Mm.
projects. And so that's not something that can be captured easily. Like I have no idea how many proposals it's been, but when I serve on panels, like I see those papers come up all the time. And so I'm really proud of that impact. Like, hey, by digging into the data, and kind of saying, hey, this is the actual situation. Like, you may have an idea in your mind that we're very diverse right now and it's like everything's fine, but that's not what the data says. Like, we still have a lot of work that we need to do. And that starts with how do we bring students into our field? How do we collaborate with people in the real world outside of academia? Um, and I think all of that work that we did in the committee, like it got me on the radar of the board of directors, and eventually I think that's one of the reasons why I got elected to the board and then had the chance to lead the organization. And like now I feel like I'm connected to so many of our members. Like at the conference that we just had in May, it's like, I talked to like hundreds of our members and I feel like I know everyone. It's kind of amazing because like not more than 10 years ago, I was like, yeah, I'll join whatever committee will have me. Like no one knows me. I don't know anyone. And now it's really blossomed. And so I think it's just maybe for me, when you join committees or when you get involved, in something, like really just throw yourself into it. It's not about how many things you're doing, it's just about how well you're doing them. And if you do things well, people pay attention, and you can build your network that way. And so I think getting involved in professional societies, especially if you're, a postdoc, a student, assistant professor, associate professor, that's a great way to like elevate your profile. And that can help you like when it comes time for looking for faculty positions, when it comes time for promotion and tenure. If people know you and know what you're about, that's going to benefit you.
Okay, I think thanks so much. That's really inspiring. So basically, just do it. Don't be picky. Do whatever you can do it and do it better, then you will be more visible in whatever you do, right? Okay.
You can be picky if you want. So this is just me.
Anyway, but then I learned that perspective because everybody have different perspectives, but I think that might be one way to be visible or just get started at least. Okay, just so you know, we have overall 21-ish minutes, but we want to have some time for audience question, about 5-10 minutes, but we have 4 more questions, so maybe it's time to speed up a little bit, just so you know. But no rush. Um, our next question is about, you're my giant, you're my mentor, for example, but who is your mentor and can you tell us anything about that?
Um, who is my mentor, you said?
Yeah, who is your mentor? How did you find them, and how
Okay.
does that help overall, for example?
Yeah, so I can be quick on this one. So Arup
Yeah,
Sengupta, as I
of
mentioned
course.
before, he brought me into this field. He's like a second father to me. I think the way I always think about him and talk about him is, hey, this guy, like he's using his knowledge, to really help people on the ground, save people's lives. And his example inspired me, the way that he approaches his work inspired me. It's all about the people and just like using our knowledge, as academics, feeling that responsibility as academics, to make the world a better place. And so, the one person in my life that, is always at the top is Arup Singh Gupta.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is about, so we are taking roles of an advisor, for example, especially junior faculty, maybe even other level, they always have a role as advisor, help someone else. And what do you think is the appropriate role of an advisor in helping a mentee? It could be student, postdoc, even faculty, especially through a challenge. How do you motivate them, for example?
Yeah, I think maybe the answer is just everything. We're people, like we have feelings, we have rough days.
Hmm.
We need to be built up sometimes. Sometimes we just need to vent, like we need people to listen to us. Um, I would say my group, I'm kind of proud about this, but I think my group cries like more than any other group.
Oh.
Not because I'm like a terrible like jerk of an advisor or anything like that, but just like, hey, there's stuff going on in the world and there's stuff going on in life, and like sometimes it's overwhelming. But I want my students to know that they can be vulnerable with me. Like I want them to know that they can share how they're feeling because that affects the work. Like, I don't want them to be robots. I don't want to be a robot. Like, it's not just about getting the papers published and cited or whatever else. Like, it's about helping someone grow from some level to another level. And so that extends across the board. Like, my office, I think, is also the office where everyone comes to cry, comes to get things off their chest. Yeah, and maybe more than like any paper or any technical accomplishment or anything else, like that's what I'm proud of. Like I'm proud to be someone that's approachable, like that someone feels like they can come to with their issues, their problems, and just be heard.
Mhm.
Um, I've learned from my partner, sometimes like people aren't looking for advice, like they're not looking for tips on how to like actually fix the situation, like they just need to be heard sometimes.
Mhm.
And so just take it one step at a time, build trust with people, especially as an advisor, try to be as approachable and available as possible. Um, because that makes all the difference. There's kind of this quote that goes around like people don't remember what you did, they remember how you treated them. And
Mhm.
so for me, like in every aspect of the job, like just focusing on treating people with kindness, and trying to make the world like a better place, like one interaction at a time.
And do you think that approach has been evolved throughout your career? At the beginning, you have this approach, but over time, you are more experienced and have more experience with interacting with your students and other duties, or maybe more academic freedom, something like that. Does that also help change your strategy or the way you approach to your students?
I think it's changed a little bit. I'm a very positive person in general. Like I'm a very optimistic person. Like I can find some, positive aspect in like even the worst experience. And so I think I try to always bring that to the group. Um, One of my former PhD students, Kiran Mai Mangalgiri, she's assistant professor at Oklahoma State University now. A few years ago, after she got started as assistant professor, she told me, Lee, like, I loved working in your lab. You were a great advisor, but you did us one big disservice. I said, oh no, like, what did I do wrong? And she said, you made it look easy. Like, you never showed us the struggles, that you faced. Like, you never showed us the frustration that I'm sure you felt at different times. And so, one thing that has evolved for me, like, just in the last few years, trying to be a little bit more transparent. Like when
Mm,
I'm struggling with something, hey, I'm a little bit frustrated, that we're not making more progress here. Hey, I'm a
mm,
little bit frustrated with how this interaction went, or, something like that. But just kind of making sure that I'm showing like my vulnerabilities as well as being open to like my students and colleagues, showing themselves to me. And I think that's been very good because, like you said, and maybe like the S.o.S. Giants community, like it's a little bit like putting people on a platform. And sometimes when you do that, like you don't see what's behind the scenes. I think it's important for us to show people what's behind the scenes for all of us because we're all people at the end of the day.
okay. Thank you so much. Okay, now next question. I think this is good question for both junior faculty looking for potential graduate students and also potential graduate students looking for position at maybe for example your lab, for example. And I don't know who typically when you hire someone, for example, it's not just about that, but young scholars, what do you think is a particular trait characteristic that stands out and you think, typically based on your experience, most oftentimes it is most successful? Because it's really hard to um expect or estimate, or it's hard to tell, it's person to person and students are from everywhere. Can you share any experience or your formula to apply?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I first moved to Baltimore, I felt very inspired. I'd see these like signs everywhere. I see this graffiti everywhere, and I said, "Be more." And I
Mm.
remember reaching out to one of my friends back in Austin. I was like, how cool is this? Like, I just moved to this city and it's already telling me I have to be more. Like, I think that's an awesome message. Like, we should always try to be more. And so, I think for this question, I'm not going to answer it directly. I think, the people that are reflecting on this, they should just figure out like what they want to be more of. So be more fill in the blank. For one person, it might be more proactive and be more resilient. For another person, it might be, hey, be more, careful and be more open to feedback. For some person, it might be, hey, be a little bit more positive. Don't be so hard on yourself. There's a lot of models for success. It doesn't just have to be one model. And so I think what really matters is just authenticity. Like if you're being yourself and you're showing that and you're being your best self, people are drawn to that. If it feels like there's a little bit of a front on, a little bit of a mask, a little bit like, hey, I'm a sterile scientist and I'm a robot. Like, I don't respond to that. Maybe some people respond to that, but I don't. And so, you know, when students ask me this, like prospective students, I usually say there's two things that do stick out a little bit to me. Like, I kind of look for people with a good work ethic, and people that have kind of a positive mindset. They want to be a part of the team. It's not just about themselves. Um, but really, like I said, there's lots of models for success, and I think really the key is just being authentic with who you are. And if you do that, like you're going to be successful, I believe.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to our last question, last pre-selected question. So this is for you. If you could go back to any stage of your life or career, any level, I don't know, you could go back as, maybe when you deliver your paper. What key piece of advice would you give to yourself, knowing what you know right now?
Yeah, I struggle with this question because I kind of don't want to answer it. You know,
Oh, okay.
you
That's
know,
fine as well.
I've had failures. I've had very bad experiences. Scary experiences. Trauma. We've all had things happen in our lives that maybe we wish, hey, we could go back and change it. But all those experiences like also make us who we are. And so, I try to like cherish experiences, good or bad. Sometimes it's hard to like find good takeaways and good lessons in some of the things that happen, in our life. But they make us stronger, like for the things that are going to come up in the future. They help us help other people through those challenges. And so, part of me, like I said, I don't really want to answer the question because I think we're made up of our experiences, both
Mm,
good and bad. But if you really put me on the spot, one thing that I tell my group members all the time, I think my biggest shame is that I'm monolingual. I
mm,
wish I spoke another language. I work with students from around the world, and there's kind of an expectation that they speak English, but I don't speak their language, and I don't think that's fair. And so that's my biggest shame. I still got years left. Maybe I can learn a language, figure out how to fit that into my daily schedule. But I think, that's something that is important, being able to like speak and interact with people, around the world. Sometimes you don't need language for it, but I think if I knew other languages, I'd be able to have more authentic interactions with people during travel.
okay. That's interesting. I'm the opposite, just so you know. I hope to be monolingual, hopefully English, not bilingual. I'm struggling in both, and especially these days, I'm doing a little bit of both. Not good at one thing. I feel like as of now, but
Mhm.
I'm always trying to be improving. Okay, thank you so much. We are done with 10 questions, and as I said, we also collected some questions from Google Form, and I will open the floor and then ask anyone to ask question. So actually, we collected a bunch of questions. This one, I shared 10 questions with you in advance, but this one we have not, and we got a list of questions, and I helped from Gemini, and I put them in. Okay, can you make categorize them and then make it simple? So I don't think you have time to cover all of them, and some of them are already covered. For example, when we talk about some of the questions, can you just pick one of them and answer to it, and then let's move on. for audience question?
Yeah, so I'll pick the last one because imposter syndrome was certainly hitting very hard when you reached out and said, "Hey, Lee, will you do this?" SOS Giants, and like I said, it's who am I? This is something I've been saying, like maybe for the last year or so, like just to kind of emphasize maybe how special our job is. And so, I think about this all the time, like who am I to like share my ideas and get money, get funding to like pursue those ideas? Who am I that all of you joins this call just to listen to me talk about when I was a paper boy and it's like, everything else. Who am I that people like want to bring me, to their university, to hear about, my work. I think it's good, like, to stay grounded. It's good to stay humble. Sometimes it's hard for me, to kind of really answer that question, like, yeah, who am I that people care about what I have to say and what I have to, think about. Um, and so I think imposter syndrome, at least for me, like it's always kind of there. But I try to just channel it in like a healthy way. Like, okay, just keep yourself grounded. Don't get a big head. Don't get a big ego, about wins. Like, just focus on doing good work and helping people. And so that's one way that I, try to work through that one. And then on a related note, personal health, I've gotten much better in recent years of being like a regular runner.
Mm,
I'm not a natural runner. Like it's always hard for me. I'm gonna run after this call. I don't
mm.
run fast. I'm very slow. But I push myself like to get out there 4 or 5 times a week and run. And even when I don't realize it, after doing a run, like stress has gone down, anxiety has gone down, like, hey, there's many things I need to do this week, and it really takes a lot of that pressure off. And so whatever it is, like could be reading, running, doing the dishes, but just those things that help you like decompress are really important. Like you can't go 100% all the time, or you're going to burn yourself out. If you don't burn yourself out, you're also going to like ruin your personal relationships. And so you got to like be aware of these things and take care of yourself and the people in your life.
Okay, thank you. I feel like I gotta go run after this as well. Thank you. Okay, so now we have about 5, 6 minutes, so it is time for you. So if you have any question for the Blaney, two options. You can either leave your questions, use a chat window, submit your question. Maybe hopefully Mohan could read it on behalf, or raise hand. I see one of them first. Can you unmute and ask your question?
Hi, yeah, hi, this is Xiao Yugao from Beidou University, Department of Environmental Science. I'm an assistant professor here at the early stage. Thank you so much for today's presentation and, introducing your experience and share with your, all these tips. I really feel it's very useful. I have a question regarding to collaboration. So, throughout the career, we all have a lot of opportunities to collaborate with everyone, a lot of different people. But how do you select who you collaborate with? Sometimes it's hard to just set stone and we have limited time. So how do you select your, collaborators and such?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad that you asked it. So thanks a lot. When I was assistant professor, it was kind of like when I joined AEESP and I was like, I'll take any committee that will have me. I was kind of, oh, someone wants to work with me. Like, I'm just going to take that collaboration, trying to make sure that I can like do the things that I need to do to get tenure. Like if that kind of leads to research funding and papers and whatever else, like, hey, I should just go after that. Um, when I was assistant professor, I had two collaborations that honestly like were kind of terrible. People that were very rude to my students, like very nasty to my students. They were fine to me, but it's kind of like, hey, this is showing who you are a little bit. And so one of those projects ended, and there was like an opportunity for kind of a phase two. And, the person came to my office and they said, hey, like we got $1 million for you for phase two, and I just said no. kind of period. And, we talked a little bit. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to continue this. And I kind of was thinking to myself, like, is this a mistake? Like turning down $1 million, this is something that could lead to a lot of good research products, like potentially a lot of good opportunities, but it wasn't a person that I wanted to keep working with. Our values just didn't align, our styles didn't align. And so, I made the decision that that just wasn't how I wanted to move forward. And the second one was a little bit similar. And so, since that time, I try to not go in blind to collaborations. I try to make sure I know the person first, that I know our values align, our styles align. And if I'm not sure, I take a little bit more time, to get to know them before jumping in, because I don't want to repeat that mistake, especially because of the impact that it has on my students. Like I can take it, but it's not fair to my students, and I don't want them to have to deal with that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on to Rao and then Kelby, and probably after that, there might be a question from the chat, right? Is it?
Yeah, appreciate. Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot, Professor Blaney. Well, if you had met with Professor Steve Dentel, Delaware is not too far for you and to your legacy from Lehigh. If you share anything, if you talked with him, I am his student because I'm woken up by remind thinking about his legacy. So that's why I say I'm still his student. So yeah, if you have any experience talking with Steve, that is, if you would like to share, that is all. Thank you.
No, thank you for the question. I don't believe I ever met Steve, but I know that we have the Dentel Award through AEESP, for kind of doing impactful work around the world. And I take a lot of inspiration from that. Like that's where Arup Sen Gupta, like the path that he put me on many, many years ago, he's actually a former winner of the Dentel Award. And so that's something that's kind of, very maybe like dear to our AEESP family. And I feel like the people that win that award, like they're all inspirations to me. And so unfortunately, I never had a chance to meet Steve, but I think his legacy is very strong. And obviously living in you and many others in our community. And I hope we keep taking inspiration from his work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Kelby?
Hello. Thank you very much. I actually went to Lehigh and I had Sengupta during my master's. So that's cool that I don't know, he's such a mentor to you. But I was wondering if you thought that there was any limitations or you suffered because you jumped right from your PhD to becoming a professor and didn't do a postdoc in between, and if you thought that there was benefit to that or just your overall opinion.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I've thought about this many times over the years. Like, how would life be different, if I did a postdoc instead? Um, probably I wouldn't be at UMBC. Like, probably I'd be somewhere else. I don't know. But I don't really have any regrets. Like, as I was finishing my PhD, I had lots of ideas, and I was kind of saying to myself, like, I want to pursue my ideas. I don't want to work on someone else's ideas anymore. Like I said, I was a little bit bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and totally naive. But I think, those first couple of years as assistant professor, like you figure a lot of things out very fast and you get up to speed. And so doing a postdoc, or even two postdocs, has become more common now. Like it would have expanded my network earlier. I would have learned more about grant writing. I probably would have been able to hit the ground running like a little bit faster as assistant professor, but I don't think I'd really change anything, to be honest with you. Those first few years as assistant professor were a little bit rough, like with all the losses that were piling up. But once things started to like hit and we started getting some wins in, grants awarded, papers published, like the momentum built very quick. And so I think, people, whether they do a postdoc or not, like the first couple years as assistant professor, it's kind of the same across the board. And I think I'm more excited that I had the chance to start like pursuing my ideas, from an earlier time, than kind of prolonging that a couple of years. But things certainly would have been different if I did a postdoc before.
No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we are a little behind schedule, but if there's any one quick question, if you have, going once.
I can ask the
Oh,
first
yeah,
one. Hey,
quick
Lee,
one.
sure. How do you define research productivity, or do you think? I mean, how should someone define it? What do you think?
So let me first give a shout out to Saeed here. Saeed was like my number one supporter, I feel, when I was AEESP president. He pretty much leads our AEESP experts program. He formed the first community of practice, Grantastic. He's on this community of practice. He does so much. And so I'm like so impressed with the energy that Saeed, brings to our community, and it's like the very strong impact that he's already had, at early career stage. And so I can't say enough good things about you, Saeed.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you
How
so
do I
much.
define research productivity? I think this is a very good question. There's kind of a practical side, like maybe a very practical side, like we have a tool in our department, that kind of turns all of your research products into points, and it kind of decides like, are you productive, are you highly productive, or are you underproductive, or whatever. I don't worry about any of that, to be honest with you. I just try to say, hey, like with my students, we're trying to make continual progress. And when we have, enough data to write the paper, that we write the paper and we push it out and we move things forward. As long as we're moving forward, and kind of keeping everything kind of on our radar, like the presentations, the papers, the grants, as long as we're kind of tackling all of those things by being organized and, having a good organizational system, I feel like we're going to be doing enough and having impact. I don't really worry so much about like counting things. I just want to make sure that everything that we do like is really polished, and I believe in 100%. And so, my students, probably all of your students are the same. It's like, hey, do we really have to like go through 10 versions of this abstract? It's only 150 words. But it's like, yeah, we do, because we want to make sure every word counts. Hey, why do you keep giving me more feedback on my slides? Like, they look pretty good. Yeah, but we can make them better. And so just making sure that like we have thresholds like for the quality of work that we want to do, and whether it's 1 paper a year or 10 papers a year, like that we just hold that thresholds, put out our quality work, and for me, I think that's enough. I want to also like be a little bit careful here. Like you should certainly talk to people in your department. They may have ideas like how many papers you need for tenure, and I don't want to discount that. Like that's important. But I think quality over quantity is much more important in terms of building your overall reputation, as a professional in our field.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for
Okay.
everything you did during your tenure.
Right back at you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lee, for your time today. So let's wrap up. So, and also thanks everyone for joining with us today. And stay tuned for our next conversation as well, which will be a joint webinar, probably early February. And if you're interested in joining, email us. And again, this part of the conversation, some part of the script, the conversation will be available through AEESP newsletter. Thank you so much.
Taeyang, sorry, can
Yeah.
we take a picture together, like with everybody's camera on?
Okay, that'd be great. But let me first stop recording first.
Please.
Let me also give a quick shout out to Chuan Hui